Good evening. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Ellison Barber in for Gadi. Schwartz coming to you from New York. Here are some of the stories we are watching tonight, starting with flash flooding that left two children, a 9-month-old and a 2-year-old, missing in Pennsylvania.
This is going to be a massive undertaking involving the coordination and the cooperation from numerous departments and agencies throughout the state and the region.
Given the severity of the floods and the fact that their mother was swept away and killed, officials say the outlook appears bleak. There seems to be no end in sight from a dangerous heat wave that is setting records and impacting millions from Florida to California.
We actually have Ziplocs, and we fill them with ice, and then we wrap our phone in the Ziplocs, and that's what keeps the phones working.
Screen actors began the first full week of their strike today. Actor Evan Rachel Wood joins us to talk about why this has been building behind the scenes for years. And a sailor and his dog survived months at sea eating raw fish and drinking rainwater.
Been through a very difficult ordeal at sea, and I'm just needing rest and good food because I've been alone at sea a long time.
Let's begin with those devastating floods in Pennsylvania. An entire community is now searching for Matilda and Conrad Shields. You see them on your screen there, two young siblings who were missing out of Bucks County. That's just outside of Philadelphia. Over the weekend, flash floods killed their mother and at least 4 other people when as much as 7 inches of rain hit the area. Earlier today, a representative from the Shields family thanked both emergency personnel and the community for all their support.
Their commitment to bringing Conrad and Mattie home is unwavering. We are thankful that they were able to save so many affected by these unprecedented floods, and we are grateful that they were able to recover many who have been lost. We respectfully ask for privacy and space, both for our family, for our friends, and loved ones, as we deal with this horrific tragedy.
Joining us now from Pennsylvania is NBC's Emily Ikeda. Emily, what do we know about these 2 young missing kids? Are search and rescue efforts still underway?
Hey there, Ellison. They absolutely are. You'll see behind me the massive cleanup efforts that still need to get underway. But right now, the top priority is still the search for those 2 young children. And they are doing so in an all-hands-on-deck approach by air, by sea, by roadway, on foot. So we're about a quarter mile from the Delaware River, and they have boats out there searching for the 9-month-old boy, the 2-year-old young girl. They also have drones. They have dogs. They're using underwater technology in an attempt to find those 2 young children in what has been just a deadly, dangerous weekend of wild weather. About 2 miles from where I'm standing, officials say that there were 11 cars trapped. They were hit by what they described as a wall of water. They didn't drive into high waters. It just completely inundated them out of seemingly nowhere because of the rapid pace of rain. Parts of this region, parts of Bucks County, saw some 7 inches of rain trapping those vehicles. Among them included a family that was visiting from South Carolina. They were on their way to a barbecue. Now, several of the family members did manage to make it out. They found a way to safety, including the father and 1 child, a grandmother, the mother tragically perishing, 32-year-old Katie Seeley. We heard from their family spokesperson who described just the devastation from their remaining family at this time, but also their appreciation, their gratitude for the first responders' works as they continue to play out this massive urgent search mission today. Fortunately, with a little bit of reprieve, a little bit of break from the dangerous downpours we've seen hammer the area over the last couple of days. Ellison, at least 5 people have died in Bucks County so far, ranging in ages from 32 to 78 years old. Ellison.
Emily, you mentioned that little bit of reprieve from the weather right now, but obviously the next couple days are critical for emergency teams in that search for those missing children, as well as just for cleanup efforts. Is the weather supposed to stay manageable in the coming days?
Well, Ellison, it's a little bit of wait and see, but there is rain in the forecast. It wasn't just Pennsylvania that was hammered over the weekend. We saw a number of states across the Northeast see an immense amount of rain. Parts of New York, for instance, saw more than 5 inches of rain within a 24-hour period. New Jersey's governor declared a state of emergency. In Massachusetts, a tornado touched down. Back here in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, you'll see just the immense damage that was caused. Buckled roadways, literal slabs of roadway picked up and moved. To my left, you might be able to make out there's almost a guardrail, but there's so much of a tangled mess of the trees behind me that has kind of disguised it somewhat. And this is such the picture that we've seen across a lot of the Northeast. Remember, this time last week, I was reporting from Orange County, New York, from a very similar serious flooding situation. There is a climate connection. Climate analysis shows that we are seeing an increasing number of heavy precipitation events, particularly in the Northeast over the past 50 years or so, and we're seeing a higher number of incidents where we're seeing that really rapid rainfall, 1, 2, 3 inches an hour, and that is what leads to those really serious flash flooding incidents. The other thing I'll point out, this is an area that is familiar with flooding, but when you also have the Delaware River, but then also these smaller creeks, when they're really narrow, there's nowhere for the water to go but up. Ellison?
All right, Emily Ikeda, thank you so much for that excellent reporting in Bucks County. We appreciate it. Pennsylvania was not the only state overwhelmed with torrential rain. Vermont is still reeling after flash flooding claimed thousands of homes and businesses and basically left the capital city of Montpelier underwater. Some areas of the state received more than 9 inches of rain over a 24-hour period just last week. Meteorologists say that level of precipitation is only expected to happen once a century. But it happened only 12 years ago after Hurricane Irene dumped as much as 11 inches on the state. Earlier today, Treasury Secretary Pete Buttigieg visited Vermont, where he surveyed the damage and met with Governor Phil Scott and suggested that climate change was to blame for all of the historic flooding.
It feels like every few weeks we see a new flood, storm, heat wave, drought. It's not lost on me that our skies are hazy because of wildfires that are of a nature and severity that should not be an annual event, and yet here we are. Americans are seeing the results of climate change with our own eyes and dealing with the consequences.
Nonstop heat waves are setting records and baking large parts of the country. For some, this is not a story about how miserable it is to go outside. It's dangerous. A 73-year-old man died this weekend in Arizona of an apparent heat-related incident. He apparently got a flat tire during a bike ride. Police later found his body on the side of the road. Phoenix, Arizona is hitting heat records today not seen in nearly 50 years. This is the 18th day in a row temperatures soared over 110 degrees. The last time that happened was in 1974. All of it is straining hospitals.
We're overcrowded with patients, and the push is for heat-related illness. When walking through the emergency department, you see that there's people in stretchers. When you walk into the place, our waiting room is filled with people with heat and heat-related illness.
More than 70 million Americans from California to Texas to Florida to Arizona were under some sort of heat advisory today. Joining us now from Phoenix, Arizona is NBC News correspondent Marissa Parra. Marissa, we heard a little of your conversation with doctors in that state. Explain to us a little more how big of a deal this heat is in terms of hospital capacity. Do they have enough space to care for people needing assistance?
Well, I can tell you right now, we went to a local hospital. It's called Valleywise Health here in Phoenix, and they were telling me, and we saw for ourselves, how they were using the overflow areas. What we couldn't show you, but what we saw with our own eyes were the hallways filled with people on stretchers hooked up to IVs, dizzy with heat exhaustion or some sort of heat-related illness. You can see on the side of the screen there, those are medical staff workers preparing an ice bath, an ice pool, and they were doing that in preparation for the anticipated next patient who would need an immediate cooling down. I had a chance to speak with an ER physician about how critical those minutes or even seconds can really be. Take a listen. So someone suffering from heat stroke, this could save their life.
Oh, absolutely. The quicker you can get their temperature down, the better. And if you just have mild dehydration, you're awake, you're not going to go in this. You're not going to tolerate it. Mm-hmm. But the fact that they can lay in this with ice on top of them, we take advantage of giving them intravenous fluids. Any orifice that we could put cool water in, we will.
So, Ellison, they're seeing everything from heat exhaustion, heat stroke, as well as third-degree burns from people falling on the pavement. And Ellison, the physician I spoke with, says he's been there for decades. He's been there since 1996 working in the ER. And he said he's never seen a summer quite like this in terms of the sheer number and volume of calls back-to-back.
And Marissa, how are emergency responders handling this heat? Is it getting to people like firefighters who have to respond to calls about heat-related illness?
Yeah, so it's kind of twofold, and you can probably tell behind me we are inside of one of the Phoenix Fire Department stations. We're at Phoenix Fire Department station number 61. We've been here for several days. We've had a chance to go out on calls with several of them. And so it's twofold here, right? Because it makes their job a little bit more busy. They're getting an increased number of calls, of course, but even the calls that aren't specifically heat related, everything has a heat element to it, right? Whether it is a call about a car crash, whether it's a call about someone that feels dizzy, the first questions that they're asking among them is, have you had enough water? How cool are you? They're taking their internal temperature. That was something that I witnessed not that long ago. I want to take you to an interview that we did with one of those firefighters about how this stacks up in comparison to previous summers. Because remember, this is an area that knows the heat. Take a listen.
This is one of the hottest summers that we've had in recent years, and so, yeah, it's taken a toll on the community. And we make sure that our truck is, really well stocked with water, and then, yeah, we have a cooler in the back that we keep IV bags on ice in the event that we do go on a heat-related deal. Getting those cold fluids on board faster is definitely really important.
So listen, a couple of things here. We know firefighters, they are tough. We have seen it for ourselves, but you can only imagine the added heat. I mean, a fire itself is already hot, but then the added heat coming from the outside and these soaring temperatures, having to wear all of that equipment only makes it even hotter. We've seen them and we've heard about how they take ice baths after particularly grueling calls, maybe to a fire that they might have to put out themselves. But Ellison, we did just learn new information within the last few minutes. I was asking one of the firefighters here how today has looked. They said that in the area they've received about half a dozen heat-related calls, including one person who got severe burns from falling out of their car and onto the asphalt. I mean, at hottest, sometimes that asphalt can get upwards of 180 degrees. That can burn you within seconds of it. And Ellison, one last thing here. You talked about how we're 18 days consecutively. We're not expected to see those temperatures fall below 110 until at least the weekend.
Wow. NBC's Marissa Parra in Arizona. Thank you so much. It isn't just in the United States where there is a massive amount of relentless heat. People in southern Europe are living in some of the hottest temperatures ever recorded. And tomorrow, it's only expected to get worse.
Well, Italian meteorologists call this latest heat wave Karen, like the ferryman of the dead, which in Greek mythology was delivering souls to the underworld. But this heat wave is delivering the poor souls who are left behind in cities like Rome, so hot, just either in the air conditioning or out of the city to the beaches or the mountains nearby, because the temperature today reached here in Rome 102 degrees Fahrenheit. But tomorrow, on Tuesday, it's going to be even worse, with a forecast of 118 to 120 Fahrenheit expected somewhere in Sardinia, an island off the western coast of Italy.
To the east, in Greece, wildfires are burning outside of Athens, and people are evacuating their homes in other parts of the country. 150 firefighters are on the scene as strong winds make the flames spread even faster. Sky News climate change and energy correspondent Hannah Thomas-Peters is in Rome, looking at how Mediterranean countries are handling the relentless heat.
Carlo Constantini is coordinating central Italy's response to the heat wave. He shows us inside the Civil Protection Authority's Situation Room, where staff monitor weather forecasts and developing emergencies, preparing to send extra help if necessary. With temperatures forecast to soar to near record-breaking levels, there is a lot to manage. I am worried about what could happen in the coming days, because if this heat wave lasts for a long time, he says, it could negatively affect us. There will be more and more wildfires. We clearly see climate change effects, and if this trend persists in the next few years, we could find ourselves in even more difficulties. On the island of La Palma in Spain, firefighters are struggling with a large blaze. Heat, dry vegetation and wind fanning the flames. Thousands have been evacuated, and neighbouring islands like Tenerife and Gran Canaria are on high alert. Despite the conditions, the tourists keep arriving at the Vatican City in Rome. Residents and visitors alike now being urged to take the heat seriously.
Italy's health ministry has issued an alert saying that people must follow the rules to protect themselves from these temperatures. And that includes staying inside if possible to avoid the heat of the day, shutting windows and curtains and drinking lots of water.
Southern Europe is used to handling hot summers, but these are exceptional conditions. Prolonged above-average heat across a huge region, and worse to come. Hannah Thomas-Peter, Sky News in Rome.
Tonight, the actors' strike is now heading into its first full week, with TV and film stars walking off the set and onto the picket lines. The union that represents 160,000 actors and performers now joins members of the Writers Guild, who've been on strike for over 2 months now. A key thing both groups are fighting for is AI protection. The Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers say part of their negotiations include a groundbreaking AI proposal that protects actors' digital likeness for SAG-AFTRA members. But according to SAG-AFTRA's chief negotiator, quote, "If you think it's a groundbreaking proposal, think again." Listen.
They propose that our background performers should be able to be scanned, get paid for 1 day's pay, and their company should own that scan, their image, their likeness, and should be able to use it for the rest of eternity in any project they want with no consent and no compensation.
The Alliance is now pushing back on that claim, calling it false and writing in a statement that their proposal, quote, only permits a company to use the digital replica of a background actor in the motion picture for which the background actor is employed. Any other use requires the background actor's consent and bargaining for the use. So regardless of which side you're on here, the fact that this AI debate is such a point of contention is a testament to the seismic shift happening in the entertainment industry right now. So let's go beyond the picket lines tonight and take a look at the deeper dynamics at play here. And who better to do that with than someone who's been in the business most of her life. You probably know Evan Rachel Wood from movies like Across the Universe, 13, and Frozen 2, or shows like True Blood and HBO's Westworld, which has some eerie similarities to the conversations we're having right now. Evan Rachel Wood joins us now with more. Evan, thank you for being with us tonight. So let's just start big picture here, because for a lot of us, I think it's easy to look at this strike and say, oh, that's just Hollywood. We might care if it means seasons of our favorite shows are delayed, but other than that, a lot of people don't necessarily feel connected to this. Why should non-actors care?
Well, I think there's going to be a bit of a trickle-down effect. I think the entertainment industry and technology have always sort of been in lockstep. And the entertainment industry is, responsible for championing a lot of these technologies and bringing them into the mainstream and introducing them to the general public. And so we sort of become, the test subjects a bit. And a lot of the talks coming up about AI and surrounding the strike, I think we need to pay very close attention to that and not write this off as this is just rich actors wanting more money, because I think that's a great distraction from a lot of really major points being made in this deal that I think will affect other people in other industries eventually.
So, I mean, the whole premise of Westworld, for all of the fans watching at home, it's centered on this idea of AI gone wrong, right? Do you worry about the future of AI, particularly in this industry?
I absolutely do. And I think we need to stop looking at it as something that's coming and accept it as something that is definitely already here. And I am not an AI expert by any means, but I was on a television show that explored it in great depth. And I was around a lot of tech innovators and experts, and, felt like I got to have a little peek behind the curtain. And what I saw was really frightening. And what scares me about these negotiations are the people that are coming to the table have their finger on the pulse of the future. They know what technology is coming. They're invested in it. They knew that streaming was coming, and we can't negotiate for what we don't understand or what we can't foresee. And I think right now we're at a precipice where it's sort of like before we knew what the internet was and before we knew what that was capable of. And so imagine trying to negotiate protections from the internet when you don't even really know what it is or what's coming, but the other people at the table do. And that feels like an unfair advantage.
Let's talk about streaming, which you just mentioned. I mean, when you think of the last actors' strike, I think it was before Blockbuster even existed, much less Blockbuster closing and then also streaming starting. So how has streaming changed the industry? What have you seen over the years?
I've been doing this since I was 4 years old, over 30 years now, and I have seen and felt a major shift in the industry that has been confusing for me in a lot of ways because I owe so much to the industry, but there's a lot of changes and things being made that I don't necessarily agree with. But I think the main thing that a lot of artists have felt from streaming is the fact that there seems to be more exposure and less money, and that's not really computing for a lot of people, and I don't think it would in any business sense. And so there's a lot of questions coming up with that, and I think there's a lot of confusion around the fact that deals were made before we knew that certain things were coming in and that streaming was going to become such a large part of our industry. And now is the time that we need to be on guard and protect ourselves. Otherwise, we're going to get locked into something that could take years and years to undo. And so yeah, I think I feel artists are very scared and on edge right now.
Disney's CEO, Bob Iger, was recently on CNBC and had some pretty strong pushback for these negotiations. Let's listen to what he had to say, and then we'll talk right after.
There's a level of expectation that they have that is just not realistic. And they are adding to a set of challenges that this business is already facing that is, quite frankly, very disruptive.
So they're not being realistic?
No, they're not.
What do you make of that, Evan? And just looking ahead a month, 2, 3 months, how do you see this strike ending?
Well, I mean, I really want to be optimistic about it, but in some ways, you know, this is always what happens when there's a major technological advancement or shift. It's sort of a double-edged sword, and artists are not sitting at the table when these decisions are being made and when people are deciding how this content will be distributed and how it will be received in the world. And artists, after the fact, sort of get corralled into it. We get corralled into streaming. We get corralled into social media, and we're told you can't exist in this industry or have value unless you exist on this platform. And I think this is where people are getting a bit fed up, but I think this is also where he has a point in that we aren't in these conversations. We're not a part of this, and there's so much that we don't know and can't foresee. And so they have an advantage over us, and we have to be extremely careful.
All right, really interesting stuff. Evan, Rachel Wood, thank you so much for your insight and your time tonight. We really appreciate it. We've got much more ahead, including an update on the escaped murder suspect in Pennsylvania. We'll tell you about the tip that helped authorities capture him and how much money the people who spotted him are hoping to get. That's next, so stay tuned.
Well, I knew who he was as soon as he stood up and I saw him. And I said, Cindy, get back in the cart. Let's go. I said, okay, have a nice day. And we started driving back. I said, dial 911.
Welcome back. Here are some of the other headlines we're watching tonight. Another end to a legal battle around the family of disgraced South Carolina lawyer Alec Murdaugh. This time it was about his son Paul, who allegedly crashed a boat while drunk, killing 19-year-old Mallory Beach. The Beach family and other survivors settled for $15 million with Parker's, the convenience store that allegedly sold Murdaugh alcohol that night when he was underage. A freight train derailed early this morning in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, just north of Philadelphia. More than a dozen cars jumped the tracks, forcing officials to call for precautionary evacuations. Hazmat crews say no chemicals spilled. The family behind an online church accused of marketing industrial bleach as a medical cure will head to court this week, according to the Miami Herald. The Department of Justice charged members of the Grinnan family with conspiracy related to their work with the Genesis II Church of Health and Healing. They claimed bleach could cure COVID-19, HIV, and other ailments. In Iowa, a judge temporarily blocked a new 6-week abortion ban. The judge said he made the decision to maintain status quo while legal challenges work their way through the court system. Iowa's Republican Governor Kim Reynolds signed the new law on Friday at the Conservative Family Leadership Summit. A murder suspect is now back in custody. Escaped inmate Michael Burham was finally caught by police nearly 10 days after he escaped prison. You can see the moment he was captured walking right there to the police car. Police were tipped off to his location after a couple heard their dog barking, and they went to see why. Burham, who is being held in Warren County Prison on charges related to kidnapping, will now be arraigned on an escape charge as well. NBC News correspondent George Solis joins me now. George, tell us more about this tip. I mean, that couple had to be shocked by what they found. What are they telling you?
It's a story that Cindy and Ron Eklund are going to be sharing for a long time, Ellison. There they were, minding their business. They're playing in their yard. Their dog, Tucker, goes off into their backyard, into a creek area, starts barking. He doesn't come back, so the couple, of course, naturally goes and investigate. And who do they see but the escaped inmate? They ask him, what's he doing there? He says he's camping. They don't believe it. They immediately take off. They're not sticking around to ask any more questions. They call 911, and then, yes, he is apprehended. More than 200 law enforcement officers were already in the region in that week-long search for this escaped inmate. Their story, remarkable. My conversation with them was intriguing because they were shocked. They were surprised. They were also a little scared. Here's a little more of my exchange with them. Walk me through that moment again. What is it when you come face to face with the person everybody is literally looking for?
Oh, my.
I was scared.
Yeah, yes, it was.
We were both scared because they said he was possibly armed. We don't know if he was. We never did hear, but there was a possibility. And I'm like, let's just go. I mean, you don't know what he's going to do.
Our immediate thought was call 911, get them here, get him caught, get him back where he belongs.
And we do know that Burham was not armed when he was taken into custody. He was tired and worn, and he was immediately brought here to the prison where he is still being evaluated by a psychiatrist. The feds also likely to come down here and have a chat with him, Allison.
So, George, is he at the same prison that he initially escaped from? Do we expect him to stay there? And when could he be arraigned on these new escape charges?
Yeah, he's not at the Warren County Jail anymore. Officials were very clear they were not going to bring him back to the place that he has successfully escaped from. So he's here at the Erie County Prison. As I mentioned, the feds are going to speak with him right now in his cell. There's nothing but the sandals he has on his feet, a mattress, absolutely no bed sheets. I do want to pivot really quickly, though, and mention that the couple at the center of this that helped find him is getting a reward. They're getting $2,000 tomorrow for their efforts, and they're likely to get that full $20,000 reward that was up for grabs for information leading to his arrest. Allison?
All right, George Solis, thank you. Welcome back. Let's get you caught up in 30 seconds. A deadly flash flood kills 5 people in Pennsylvania as authorities continue a desperate search for 2 missing children. Tens of millions of Americans are still dealing with dangerous heat levels, and the record-breaking temperatures are expected through at least the middle of the week. And today begins the first full week of the actors' strike, affecting more than 160,000 members of SAG-AFTRA, joining the WGA, whose members have been on strike since May 2nd. Imagine a presidential ticket with a Democrat and a Republican running together. It might sound impossible, especially in today's political climate, but one group called No Labels is actually exploring the idea, and they're starting to get some traction.
What we stay true to is if the American people want a choice, and they, on both sides, it looks like they don't want the choices that they're given, so there is a path for victory, to not spoil, but to win. No Labels would offer the ballot line to a ticket to go off and run and win.
Tonight, No Labels hosted what they call a common sense town hall. And the headliner of the big event, Democratic Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia, took the stage alongside former Republican governor of Utah, Jon Huntsman. Manchin's participation and his support for this unique approach is now sending rumors swirling about a potential presidential bid from the senator himself.
Washington's making you believe that you're divided, and I've said this, you are not divided. This country's not divided. The politics in Washington, it's a better business model if they can keep you divided. We're trying to say, hey, boys, get off your high horse on the right and the left, come back together, and let's do our job.
NBC's Vaughn Hilliard joins us live from New Hampshire. Vaughn, good to see you, my friend. Let's start with the obvious question here. What on earth is the No Labels group? I vaguely remember something with that name starting as an advocacy group 10 plus years ago. Is that the same group?
Right. This is the same group. They started in 2010. They created what they called the Problem Solvers Caucus of some congressional members up on Capitol Hill. But this is the first time they've tried to get into presidential politics. And we should be very clear. We're paying attention to this organization, not because, they're raising a couple $1,000s and handing out, some campaign literature. They are building a $70 million war chest to get this potential presidential ticket on the ballot in all 50 states. The question, though, is which candidates are they going to go with? And could Joe Manchin potentially be one of those? I tried to ask the West Virginia Democrat just that. Take a listen. Are you considering running for president on the No Labels third-party ticket?
We're not considering anything about running for any office.
Are you taking it off the table?
We're
running
not
for
taking
president?
anything off the table.
So how will you determine whether to run for president or not?
This is not about running. I'm not in that decision.
But it's an outstanding question.
It'll be next year.
Now, Allison, part of the concern is that among some national Democrats is that, let's say Joe Manchin were to get into this race, there's concern that he could pull and siphon some of those Biden voters away and help boost Donald Trump's presidency. But of course, we don't even know who the Republican candidate would be. And so there's a lot of variables at play.
Vaughn, how do voters feel about this? I mean, we have really only had maybe one viable third-party candidate in the 90s with Ross Perot in, 50 years? Do voters seem like they're open to an actual third party here?
Right. We've heard discontent with American politics for a long time, but we haven't seen, since Teddy Roosevelt in 1912 mount a real direct, well-funded and operated third-party effort. And that's what would be different about this. I want to let you hear from a couple of voters we talked to in New Hampshire, because when you ask voters about third party, somebody that's not Donald Trump or Joe Biden, well, a good number of them seem open to it.
We need someone in the middle. The issue is one extremist versus another extremist, and no one's ever going to agree if we just keep picking the extremes.
No, I need somebody else.
That is not Biden or Trump.
Right.
Yeah, I can look forward to that if it's a decent candidate. Yeah, absolutely.
And Allison, No Labels is quick to say, hey, look at your own polling, NBC News. Just this spring, 70% of American voters said they didn't want Joe Biden to run for president again. 60% said they didn't want Donald Trump. So in the scenario, it is a 2020 rematch. There could potentially be an opening for a third-party ticket. It's a matter of who would be on that ticket, though, Allison.
All right, Vaughn Hilliard, thank you so much. Now to an incredible story that sounds a lot like the movie Castaway. An Australian sailor and his dog were found in the Pacific Ocean after, get this, months lost at sea. 9 News Australia reports the pair were found drifting in the Pacific Ocean after a storm wrecked their boat. Tim Shattuck and his companion Bella set out for French Polynesia from Mexico in April. A storm damaged his catamaran a month into the journey. They survived for 3 months under the canopy of his boat, eating raw fish and catching rainwater to drink. Miraculously, a helicopter from a nearby tuna boat found them while searching for fish. Now both Tim and Bella are headed to Mexico for treatment. Now to a mystery in Alabama. 25-year-old Carly Russell went missing this past Thursday after she called 911 to say she found a toddler stranded on the side of a highway. Then late on Saturday night, she returned home, safe and sound and alone. NBC's Priscilla Thompson has more.
Well, Allison, tonight, Carly Russell is safe and surrounded by family, but there are still many questions about her disappearance, including where she was, what happened to her, and, of course, about that 911 call that started it all. All of this began last Thursday night when police received a 911 call from Russell saying that she saw a child on the interstate. We know that police believe she pulled over to check on that child and was actually on the phone with a family member. Her mother described that family member saying that she heard Russell check on the child and say, "Are you okay?" And then she heard a scream and she heard some shuffling before she began to only hear traffic noise. Police say that they arrived to the scene within minutes and they found her car still running along with her purse and some other personal belongings scattered on the roadway, but there was no sign of Carly Russell. And for days, police and volunteers were searching for any sign of her. And then late Saturday night, she showed up on the doorstep of her family home. According to police, they say she was on foot and alone. The family called 911 and medics came out and evaluated her and ultimately transported her to an area hospital. We know the police did have an opportunity to speak to her at the hospital, although they are not sharing what they heard from her at the hospital. But she returned home on Sunday morning, and that's when we began to see members of her family, her mom posting, saying how grateful they were for all of the public support and to have her home. But we also saw her boyfriend post saying that Carly Russell was, quote, literally fighting for her life for 48 hours. He says that she's not in a place physically or mentally to talk about her kidnapper or their whereabouts. So that's certainly concerning for people reading that post. I did ask police about that. They are not commenting on that post, but they are saying that they hope to speak with Carly Russell again in the coming days as they continue this investigation. And of course, another key question for police here is what happened to that child that Carly Russell reported on the highway? Police say that they received no other reports of a child walking on the highway, and they also haven't received any reports of a missing child. So just another mystery in this case. But of course, so many people here in this community and of course this family grateful to have Russell back home and safe. Ellison?
NBC's Priscilla Thompson, thank you. Up next, a crucial bridge blown up for the second time in less than a year. Russia says Ukraine attacked a bridge linking Russia to annex Crimea. We'll talk about what it means for the war going forward. Let's take a quick look around the world in 80 seconds. In England, Elton John and his husband testified in the Kevin Spacey sexual assault trial today. They appeared remotely from Monaco. One of the alleged victims said he was driving Spacey to Elton John's annual gala ball in 2004 or 2005 when Spacey groped him in the car. But John and his husband testified that Spacey only attended the ball once, and it wasn't in 2004 or 2005. They say it was in 2001. Spacey has pleaded not guilty to a dozen charges of sexual and indecent counts. A fire swept through several neighborhoods and markets in Damascus, Syria on Sunday. Several homes and shops were burned down, but no injuries were reported. The fire has been put out, but authorities are still investigating what caused it. In South Korea, the death toll from deadly floods has now increased to at least 40. At least 13 of those people were killed when cars got trapped in a tunnel underpass this weekend after heavy rain. The country has gotten at least 23 inches of rain since last Thursday, and more is expected. In Australia, a mysterious dome washed up on a beach, baffling police and locals. Authorities are still investigating what the item might be. There was some speculation that it might be part of the infamous Malaysian Airlines plane that went missing back in 2014, but authorities have denied that. Right now, it is being treated as hazardous, and people have been asked to keep their distance. Ukrainian naval drones hit a key bridge linking Russia to the annexed peninsula of Crimea earlier today. That is according to reports in Ukraine. Ukraine's defense ministry declined to comment, but a Ukrainian public broadcaster citing multiple law enforcement officials is reporting that this was a special operation involving the security service of Ukraine and the Ukrainian Navy. Russian officials say the blast killed a couple and seriously injured their daughter. This is the second time the bridge has been attacked since Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. So what makes this bridge so significant for Ukraine and Russia? NBC's chief international correspondent, Keir Simmons, is here with me. Keir, you are one of the few people who has actually been across that very bridge. Remind us why this bridge is so significant symbolically for Russia and also the strategic importance here.
Yeah, I mean, one of the few journalists since the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, the substantial invasion. Look, Crimea is absolutely crucial to Russia strategically in President Putin's mind. Remember that the port of Sevastopol is there. That's where Russia's Black Sea Fleet is based. And in many ways, you could argue that some of the decisions that President Putin has made around Ukraine has been about trying to protect that particular base. It is also now a crucial supply line. When we went there, we saw a lot of Russian military there. The front is further in, if you like, into mainland Ukraine. But, of course, getting supplies there is important, and that bridge really is effective for that. So it's a peninsula. That bridge connects it to the Russian mainland. Again, that's important psychologically for President Putin, because it kind of underscores his idea that Crimea is part of Russia. So this is an emotional blow as well as a strategic blow for President Putin. And we are hearing tonight that it has been partially reopened.
Yeah, so what is Russia going to do next? We're hearing that they've already said we're out of the grain deal. There were already some talks about that happening before this, but some think that might be retaliation. Do we expect to see more action from Russia in light of this?
Yeah, I mean, that's happening like now. I mean, we're obviously behind the time zones in Europe, and so we're into now a point where that grain deal is no longer in place. That was a deal that allowed Ukraine to ship its grain through the Black Sea. You can't do that if Russia is threatening those ships. Insurers just won't insure them. And what that means is an enormous amount of grain from Ukraine isn't getting to parts of the world, including some of the poorest countries in the world. By the way, it's also not getting to China, and there is some hope that the Chinese might put pressure on the Russians to go back into that deal. What are the Russians saying? Well, they're saying, look, we aren't being allowed to export our food, and we want to be able to do that, and then we would be prepared to reopen that deal. But, of course, as the Secretary of State sort of kind of suggested today, President Putin was behind this invasion, so he kind of suggested, well, you're responsible for all this. You could easily end it, if you like, by just withdrawing. That's clearly not going to happen. I mean, there is what looks like something of a stalemate at this stage. We wait to see how the Ukrainian counteroffensive plays out.
Keir Simmons, as you mentioned, one of the very few, if not only, journalists who has actually reported from Crimea, been on that bridge since the full-scale invasion began. We appreciate your time tonight. Thank you, Keir. All right, before we go, age is just a number. Granny basketball is taking over, and the competition is fiercer than ever.
I might have thought that grannies can't play competitive. They could definitely play ball. But now that I'm between the court, it is competitive.
There's a group of grannies, some twice his age, showing what they got on the court. I'm talking about granny basketball. Women over 50 flocked to the Midwest this weekend to battle it out in the championships. NBC News Iowa political embed Alex Tabbitt took a break from politics to check it out.
They shoot. They score. They FaceTime their grandchildren.
FaceTime Kiana Price.
This is Granny Basketball.
I think we're redefining what old is.
This past weekend, grannies from across the country traveled to Decorah, Iowa for the 18th annual Granny National Basketball Championships.
And our oldest player in the league is 92, I believe.
I might have thought that grannies can't play competitive. They could definitely play ball, but now that I'm between the court, it is competitive.
Grannies putting their bodies on the line to take home the trophy.
Was it worth it?
Sure.
There are some key differences between regular basketball and granny basketball. In granny basketball, there are 6 players in the court instead of 5. No jumping is allowed, and there's no running allowed. But hurrying is encouraged.
What's the difference between running and hurrying?
As a referee, if you're wondering whether it's running, then we call it running.
Barb Trammell founded Granny Basketball in 2005. Today, she wears many hats in the league, including referee.
It's wonderful exercise, great camaraderie, wonderful stress reliever. Go Mustangs!
And a sense of community that benefits the body and the mind.
You can't be stressed out about anything when you're running around chasing a ball.
In between games, Granny's doing whatever they can to cool off. And in the finals, the Carlisle, Iowa Redbirds take home the championship.
2, 3, 4,
But for some grannies, the community they built along the way is the real prize.
I recently lost my husband, and my team has been such a support to me, and they've been there for me every step of the way.
Alex Tabbitt, Decorah, Iowa.
Alex Tabbitt, thank you so much for that. All right, and before we go, it is time for the best of us. Incredible people doing incredible things. One teen at just 14 years old is joining some of the best animators in the world on Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Our own Gadi Schwartz has his story.
Swinging into summer as a bona fide smash hit, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse is setting new heights for Sony Pictures Animation, raking in more than $600 million. It's the animation studio's most successful film yet. This is unbelievable. What's really unbelievable? One of the film's animators is just 14 years old. When the movie's first trailer came out, Toronto native Preston Mutonga decided to recreate it shot for shot with computer-generated Legos.
Not bad, kid. I eventually finished it in like 2 weeks. Then once I posted it online, it started getting all sorts of traction. And the next thing I knew, Sony was like emailing me.
An email that would change his life.
And it had been passed around amongst the Spider-Verse crew and, you know, some of the best animators in the world looking at it going like, no way, a 14-year-old kid did this? No way, no way.
The email was a job offer to animate a Lego scene for the movie.
What was it like to get that call, to get that email?
Getting that email was honestly so surreal.
At some points, you must have been going to school and doing this, right?
Yeah, I had to balance out doing schoolwork and doing the animation for the movie.
Preston's parents encouraging him every step of the way.
Yeah, we wanted him to succeed, so we really dedicated time during that period to make sure he had everything he needed.
Including a computer they built for him from scratch that was powerful enough to get the work done faster.
What was that like, working with Chris Miller?
He's like one of my idols. Like, it lit me up.
For Chris, the feeling was mutual.
It was really the part of my day that I would look forward to the most on this movie. I was like, oh, we get to have a meeting with Preston this afternoon. That's going to be great.
Hiring a 14-year-old to take part in a major motion picture, that's kind of a gamble there.
Obviously, it's a big risk that you're going to like put this in the hands of a kid, and is it going to work out or not? But it was so exciting and such a fun idea that we all just rallied around it.
What'd you learn about yourself in this whole process?
I found out like I was capable of so much more than I thought I was.
With more than 22 million views on YouTube, animation seems to be a superpower.
What's the advice you have for other parents out there?
Love your kid for who they are.
Preston's advice sounding a lot like something Miles Morales might say.
Don't let anyone tell you that you can't do it. You can.
Gadi Schwartz, NBC News.
That does it for us tonight. I'm Ellison Barber. We'll see you tomorrow, but until then, stay tuned now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.